the oven.
Wow.
So that was several hours actually. This one took 8 hours.
So was this something that someone had like uploaded as a?
Hang on. There we go. So people are modifying their Nintendo Switches. I have to peel this off. They come stuck to the. See? It comes stuck to the thing. So that's the base.
Nice.
So people are modifying their Nintendo Switches, and then when they do it, they upload the plans. It's like GitHub for 3D printing.
Yep. Like Thingiverse or stuff like that.
Thingiverse and Maker this and Maker, So basically, the deal is that the Nintendo Switch has a dock. This is the Switch. The Switch goes into the dock like this, and it's quite a large dock. It's arguable that the dock is larger than the Switch. So if you wanted to take it to a hotel,
right?
It's kind of lame. And this is USB-C.
Okay.
And it's not just, there's no such thing as a USB-C to HDMI. That doesn't exist. You could do Thunderbolt over that. Like there's the protocol and then there's the wiring. So then I took the dock apart and put the dock inside this. This is a 3D printed case. So that's the dock. That's the innards of the dock. So now I could go like this.
Nice.
And then now that's, I could throw that in my, but that's kind of janky. This is shaped weird because that's the size of the thing. So then I just literally, as we were sitting here, printed this one. So that's pretty decent. But, and Damian will be here in a minute, by the way, y'all. So there's the base. So this will go like that. But you see this bottom part here? You see that?
Yep.
See all that crap? That is the
that's the like support.
Material.
Yeah.
Exactly, because it printed like that. So what I have to do, and this is what you do when you have your 3D printing stuff, is you pull that out in a way that doesn't necessarily break the thing. So then you've got your iFixit stuff to pull all that crap out of there. And if it works correctly, it just comes out cleanly. And if it works horribly, then you end up looking like a schmuck. How are you?
That was good. That was my small experience with 3D printing last year. As we did a good amount of stuff in this class. I was helping teach a kids robotics class, and the local library had some people on staff that would help us print things. And the main thing that they would fix our models. We'd come in with something and we're like, hey, some kids designed this, and they'd be like, cool, all right, let's fix this. And they'd go in and do all that, like set up the supports and make sure it would actually not fall over when it was printing.
Yeah, when you print stuff out, you have to print it also like we have to decide how it's going to sit. Is it going to be upside down? Sometimes people make models, but they don't think about how they should sit on the thing. Like this model could have been printed on its side. That would be an appropriate way to print it. But then how would that change the way the structural material got made?
Yeah. So
you end up getting, you'll go and you'll download a free model, and then you'll flip it. So like, for example, do you see the lightsaber on the wall now?
Nice.
Yeah, you like that?
Yeah.
I do.
Right there. Yeah.
That is actually mounted with a 3D printed lightsaber holder, and you can actually go and see the holder. The lightsaber mount is 3D printed, and that is on my Instagram. I had to print that 3 times because the first 2 the layers sat a certain way, but the downward pressure of the lightsaber, because it's mounted against the wall, sheared the layers off. So I printed the layers at 90 degrees, right? So then they wouldn't be a problem. So those kind of things matter. Oops. Okay. So hello everyone. It's the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up / Nintendo Switch 3D Printing Hour. Damian will be here just a second. I'm going to mute myself so I can rip on this thing without much trouble. And I think I just broke a piece. And John Galloway has a whole series of links for us.
I sure do. Yeah.
So let me turn it over to you, sir.
All right, here we go. So I'm going to start out by taking a second take on Shane Boyer's post from last week. So this one, I kind of made some mistakes on presenting it. And basically he links through on this GitHub issue and explains in detail. And I did not do a clear job on that. So apologies to Shane. And so the basic thing is that the generate documentation file does work. It does create documentation files. These are the / XML files that create documentation. However, it does not copy them to the output when you publish. And in this issue, Dave Keen, brings up the fact that, hey, it's a developer artifact, so we're not expecting you to use that. However, people that are using them in Swagger does use that at runtime to generate the UI, the documentation UI, or excuse me, the UI that lets you interact with it. So that's what Shane was pointing out here, is basically that you can use MS Build. There's several different things in that GitHub issue that explain how to do that. And then he kind of settles on this. And then his final one, he's got a project shown here that shows this, using a copy in your MS Build file in order to copy that over. So that's what that's about. Hey, Damian.
Hello.
So this one is, okay. So here is a post by Stephen Cleary, and he's talking about synchronization context. I thought this was a really interesting post. So he's talking about differences between previous versions of ASP.NET where you could use a synchronization context to the kind of full async stack that we have now with ASP.NET Core. So explaining some differences on how that works, and some things like beware implicit parallelism. So this is an interesting thing here.
We had someone run into an issue with that this week, actually. Things like HTTP context are still not thread safe and unlikely to ever be. So you have to be very careful when it comes to using TPL and inadvertently ending up doing things in parallel that might then go on to touch anything in the HTTP context, which can be difficult to ascertain sometimes, especially if you call a third-party library that's doing integration. So, basically the rule I always say is that if you do anything off the main thread in ASP.NET Core or ASP.NET, here be dragons. Like, you got to know what you're doing. Mm-hmm. There's no safety net. Like, it will explode if you don't know what you're doing.
So he calls out, he says you don't need to call configure await false, but he recommends still doing that in libraries because you don't know what the library is doing.
The bigger reason for that in libraries, as I understand it, is libraries often want to get used in multiple environments, some of which do include a synchronization context. That includes things like unit test libraries. Like XUnit has a synchronization context. So if you don't do configure await false, then your callbacks will be automatically captured to run on the sync context that was present when you invoked the async call. So,
right, yeah.
So that's why you tend to do it, because .NET code is shared amongst multiple environments. So.
Yeah, and that's what he's saying there. If you use it in a UI app, legacy ASP.NET app, exactly, yeah. So good stuff. So this one's an interesting one. This one is, and I mispronounced his name several times. He actually sent me, and so I'm going to try and say it right, but Fanny Reinders. So, this is just kind of a fun one. He's talking about using iServer and create your own web server. So basically, he creates his own awesome server and, goes through explaining kind of how to do that.
That is gnarly.
Yeah. And he, very clearly at the end says, I can't see any real reason to do this. It's just cool.
That's cool. If people are interested in that, read that post and then go and find the talk that Fowler and I did at NDC Oslo, I think it was last year. And it wasn't the Kestrel talk, it was a different talk. And I wrote, I mean, if I can do it, anyone can do it. I wrote a web server that ran in a Windows Forms application, like a WinForms app, that just did function calls. There wasn't actually any socket open. So I ran an ASP.NET Core app in a WinForms app by just saying like run request, having a method called run request. And it would just call through the pipeline and then return the HTML back, which I then rendered in an embedded browser control. So
awesome.
Yeah, you can do crazy stuff.
Cool. Speaking of hosting, this is Tom Dykstra. So this is documentation on the ASP.NET Core docs, and this is about hosting ASP.NET Core apps in a Windows service. So he kind of goes through and explains how to do that using run a service. So cool. So this is fun. This is from Steve Gordon, and he's been working on the humanitarian toolbox. And blogging about kind of what he's running into along the way. It's been neat watching what they've been doing because they've been going through all the different versions and upgrading. So here he talks about things he ran into in migrating from Project JSON to CS Proj. So, some interesting gotchas along the way here. Some things like, one thing he pointed out was make sure you're running on the latest, on the newest IDE. His first take, he was not on the newest, and he ran into issues. He also talks about some things like clearing his NuGet cache. There was something about the package or the link between the unit test folder and his main project. That link wasn't set up. And then he ran into one other thing with the wrong version or a different version than he expected of browser link being selected. So this was just something that he had put here. So, and one other thing he noted was that the add user secrets has changed to require string there.
Well, there's another overload too. There's an overload that we prefer to use, which is in the templates, which is a generic one. It takes a type, and then we will use the assembly of the parse type in order to discover the embedded. Yeah, that one.
Okay.
So that's the one which is syntactic sugar over the one that takes assembly. So we use that one in the templates. I think it's a little nicer than passing the string around everywhere because the string is also in the project file. But if you use the generic one, what happens during build is we take the MS build property that's in your project file and we embed that in an attribute in the application's output assembly so that we can find it at runtime. So this the reason for this change is because user secrets relied on the project system in order to find where the ID of the user secret sort of project ID is. And obviously that changed between Project JSON and CS Proj, so we had to update a runtime package as a result of the project change, which was unfortunate, but it was one of the very few edge cases where we had to do that.
Okay. So here's one from Andrew Locke, and he's been writing for a while on all kinds of different things, deep in the stack and all that. This one is actually just a great web developer practice, but he's talking about adding favicons to your ASP.NET Core website. So he points out using real favicon or favicon generator.net. And some things, it's gotten more complex than way back in the day. There's all these different types, there's the iOS ones, and there's the Android ones, and there's the Windows Metro ones, and there's the pin tab ones. And so he kind of goes through and explains what all different kinds of ones you should expect to use nowadays, and then shows putting them into an ASP.NET Core web applications. This is a really good finishing touch to make a professional application that you're actually going to ship. So that's nice. Okay, Scott Saubers, he's got a very interesting post here on global exception or global error handling using iException handler path feature. So he goes through several different things in here, including talking about he talks about, first of all, that Elma is not actually an ASP.NET Core yet. So that's something I've mentioned before, is there's Elma.io and that there's Elma, the Elma project itself. And Elma project itself has not been ported. Elma.io is not actually affiliated. They're similar, but and there's some places where Elma.io developer is commenting on this and saying he could contribute back, etc. But so no Elma.
So Elma.io is not related to.
So it's kind of there's
Latif Aziz stuff. It seems odd to name it like that.
Yeah. So it looks like there's some coordination in this. So he's saying he's promised to look at Elma and kind of contribute back some things, but they are different projects.
That is both confusing and problematic, it seems to me.
Yeah.
It sounds like I may not know the full story, but it seems odd. Application Insights has replaced Elma for me, but it would be nice to have a basic Elma for ASP.NET to get stuff like, because I used to use Elma all the time. It was fantastic. Just to get yellow screens of death via RSS feed. Yeah.
So Scott does point out in here that there is the Elm handler thing. What is that? Elm, where are you, Elm?
ELM, right. Diagnostics.elm.
Yes. So that is available. However, that doesn't persist the data anywhere. That's a developer time kind of thing, right? So it's not logging anything out.
Yeah, the Elm stuff is our stuff.
Yep, exactly. So so anyway, really nice thing about going through, catching exceptions, catching the path, and logging information out. And this is for if you're on premise and you just want to log something out yourself, being able to catch errors and log them. So neat stuff. And then I'll finish up with one. This is interesting. So Hisham had contacted you, Damian, on tag helper component and like dependency injection with scripts. So he kind of blogged up some of this stuff.
Yeah, so this is the new feature that we just checked in like last week.
Yeah.
And he's already, like, he sent a pull request to Live ASP.NET saying, I'm using it. I'm like, dude, I'm not upgrading Live ASP.NET yet. I'll wait for a release, but thank you.
So this looks like really handy. The idea generally is that instead of needing to go in and do inject and HTML raw and inject scripts into head and body, tag helper component allows your component to just inject those scripts directly, right? So then he goes through and does that, and he points out, for the case where you do have, something like this.
Yeah, so basically the way to think about it is that tag helper components aren't full-blown tag helpers. Like tag helpers you declare at the top of your view or in your view imports, and that allows you to use them. Like you can actually like refer to them in your CSHTML files, right? So you can say like angle bracket cache or angle bracket input ASP-4. So you're actually using it as if you're calling it as an API. Tag helper components are designed to be sort of silent. So they're things that you want to light up automatically as part of like enabling a larger set of features. And so the canonical example we're using right now is this type of feature where you want to add something like application insights tracking or Google Analytics tracking, or maybe mini profiler or glimpse or something like that needs a browser link that needs to emit something in the HTML, but you don't want people to have to go and not only add services to DI and add a middleware and go and add the requisite JavaScript in the correct location. You just want to go, hey, call this one function on Web Post Builder, and we'll do all that for you. We didn't have a mechanism in the box for like emitting things in the head tag or the body tag that would be required to facilitate that. So the way it works is that we have two new tag helpers in MVC Core 2, one called the head tag helper and one called the body tag helper, which aren't particularly interesting. They take in iTag helper components from the DI container. So any iTag helper component that you put in DI, which you can do as part of one of these light up methods on Web Host Builder, will be sucked into the head tag helper and the body tag helper. And then those tag helpers can decide whether they want to actually do anything at runtime. Sorry, those iTag helper components can decide whether they want to do anything at runtime just based on whether the current tag is a head or a body. And we did work with tag helpers previously to ensure that you can sort of efficiently add or prepend content to an element without having to process the content that's already in it. So it doesn't result in like double buffering or anything like that. If you just want to like add a link at the top of the body tag, you can do that without having to process everything else that's in the page. So that's what this facilitates. Yeah. And then if you wanted to, you can write your own tag helper that takes in your own iTag helper components and puts them on any element. But out of the box, we will only support them lighting up for head and body because that sort of covers the gamut of what we wanted to do in this release.
That seems very reasonable. It's a right of first refusal for your tag helper.
Yeah, basically.
I saw people complaining about that on Twitter. I didn't think that was a reasonable thing to complain about.
About what in particular?
About the head one specifically. Like they were like, oh, just write HTML. It's like, well, you need an opportunity to jump in during stream processing and write your HTML. I thought it was people look at stuff like this and they remember how we used to struggle to get a hold of things in web forms, and they make weird associations that are not correct or appropriate.
Right. Well, a nice example. Here, he shows his code, how he's changed his code, right? And it's nice to see how it cleans up, right? So
no, it is nice, yeah.
So here's where he creates it, and then in the actual page, he gets rid of the having to inject it. So needing to put all this markup in the page, right? And
and like I said, like there's different classes of HTML emission, right, from libraries, and some of them you want to be explicit, and other ones like this, it's generally nice to have something automatic that you can then override and be more careful about if you want to. The web forms comment is actually an interesting one because in web forms, you actually couldn't do things like this simply because everything kind of had to be in the context of the form. There was that one server-side form per page, and the script manager had to be in that form, so you couldn't put the script manager like in the head, so all the scripts were read into the body. Like there was a lot of limitations to how things kind of worked in web forms. Whereas obviously with tag helpers, we don't have a server-side DOM, we don't have anything like that. You can just do anything anywhere. Like it's just text. We don't really care. So I think it's vastly more flexible.
Yeah,
And we have great. We have goals and desires to do even more with tag helpers moving forward, including redesigning our entire sort of composition model. So instead of doing at section and like render body and render section, all that type of stuff, we'd love those things just to be tag helpers that kind of automatically compose, so that your content page, for example, could state that it wants to use layout page X, and then rather than having to have sections defined so that a content page could put content in, say, the head of the layout page, you could just add a head tag to the top of your content page, and that will automatically compose in with the head tag that's already existing in the layout page. Orchard, for ASP.NET Core, is already doing similar things like this. They have a very interesting resource manager or asset manager set of tag helpers for doing CSS and images and JavaScript from modules and components. So they're already exploring some of these ideas, and we're looking to do that sort of in a further release as well. So I'm super excited about what we're going to be able to do with tag helpers, continuing to innovate there.
Cool. That's it for me.
Oh. Well, hello, everyone. I came late. Sorry.
So as we said, we didn't get the EF people due to some scheduling and a team, some people in the team moving around. But
we did talk to them, and they want
to cool to come on. We just need to get the scheduling time figured out. So yes, we didn't forget y'all.
How was your week?
I took part of the week off. It was spring break.
Yeah, mine's next week, so I'll be off next week.
I was telling. Before you got here, we were talking about 3D printing. I told you I took apart the Nintendo Switch dock.
I saw your tweets last night, yeah.
So I got the dock down to that size.
Oh my goodness.
So you can take the Switch.
And you just have to line it up a bit more carefully, I guess.
No, actually you don't. There is there's
a little tab.
The notch right here. Let me flip you off that notch right there.
Yeah.
And you see the notch right here.
Oh, that is very clever.
So not my design, Thingiverse.
Industrial design.
So now that's that. Now, before I have to
press it together a bit more.
So while I printed an alternative one. That's this one here.
Yes.
Which you would think you would want, and it sits like that, but not exactly throw in your bag friendly. And I don't know. I printed an alternative one just to see if it would look nice, but you'd have to put the guts in there. You have a bunch of white space. This thing then goes like that, and you screw it in, and you have the base of it like this. So
that's cool.
It's cute, but the whole point is you don't need that. You're projecting on the TV. It doesn't need to be in a dock. So that's not. It's this or that. I think I'm gonna just throw that in my bag.
The one on the left kind of reminds me of the aesthetic of the Surface dock, like the newer one.
Yeah, definitely. There's only so many ways to make an angle.
Not that one, the other one. Like that's like the old Surface dock, and that's like the new Surface dock.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
That's cool.
So yes, all is well.
Very cool. Very cool.
All right.
I was going to I should give a quick update on some things, shouldn't I?
Yeah. What do you got?
Well, it's April. My God, where's a year gone? Like, I hate date math. Can we just not have to ship software and just have forever? It would be so much nicer. Then I could build the product I want to build, not have to make any compromises because of time.
People don't realize stuff. Like we're looking at things in Windows. Like there are stuff that needs to be shipped in Windows that we want to support in .NET. And like we just shipped what they call RS2, which is the Windows Creators Edition. You can download it tomorrow with the assistant, or you'll get it automatically on the 11th. And people don't realize that if stuff doesn't get into Windows, then there's features in .NET that you won't get, which then bubbles all the way up to ASP.NET.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in some cases, absolutely. And not only that, but obviously we have a lot of stuff in .NET that's now, because it's cross-plat, that we have totally different implementations between Windows and Linux. And in some cases, the Linux implementations probably need a bit more work to get up to the performance and other facets that we really want. And so I'm looking forward to a bunch of those things happening in .NET Core 2. I know that the sockets stack the .NET, system.net.sockets implementation for Linux is going through a really good scrub for 2.0. So we should see some really nice improvements there. The ongoing Kestrel sort of replumbing that I've alluded to a few times, or talked about, I should say, a few times, is going very well. Performance gains are holding steady. We have completed the transport abstraction, which is now what enables us to so basically change what underpins Kestrel by way of a package. So, currently we're based on libuv. We made a fairly big deal out of that over the past few years, which is the same cross-plat async IO and scheduling library written in C that Node uses. However, it comes with some challenges. We would like the ability to be able to take a directly leverage IO stacks that are closer to the operating system when we run on particular OSs. Also, system.net.sockets is itself an abstraction to different IO stacks, and so we would kind of just like to use system.net.sockets with Kestrel. So we have that abstraction now. We can plug in different transports, and we are building a system.net sockets transport. And the intent is that we will change the default transport from libuv to system.net sockets when it's ready. I'm not going to promise that for 2.0, but when it's ready. And then we have other experimental transports we're looking at, like the Windows-specific registered I/O or RIO transport, which I think we talked about on the perf. It's one of the very first stand-ups we did when Ben Adams was submitting those crazy PRs and samples of using RIO. So those are things that we've unlocked now as part of this refactoring, which is really exciting to see. And I'm looking forward to seeing what type of perf we can get out of those as we keep going. The other thing happening with Kestrel is that we are continuing to do work to prepare it for use as an edge server. So, we still have in our docs the guidance that Kestrel should not be run directly on the internet. You should always place it behind some type of reverse proxy system, which has more of the HTTP style protections that you would expect for exposure to the internet. We are doing work in Kestrel 2.0 to basically allow us to remove that caveat. So that if you want to run it on the open internet, you have to still take the usual precautions of any server on the open internet, but we will have all the requisite timeout settings. They will be defaulted to reasonable defaults that so you don't have to think too hard about it. When you start out, obviously anyone putting anything on the internet should think very hard about what their settings are and all those type of things for their load. But a lot of those things just don't exist in Kestrel today, so we're adding them. They include things like timeouts for the client to send all the headers, timeouts for the client to send the request body once it starts, idle timeout for keep alive connections that aren't currently processing requests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, so that it's much harder for someone just to open a bunch of connections and DOS your server. So we're doing that work.
I have a question on that, and I realize security, that might be something to bring in Barry or something, but I've had people ask if, since the guidance is don't put this out, this isn't a hardened edge server yet, then some people, when they're working with their IT folks will say, well, if that's the guidance, should we even put Kestrel in our DMZ? Like, is it a security, you know what I mean? Like, and I think from what you're talking about there, that kind of hardening has nothing. It's not like it's this is untested and not ready or whatever.
No, we're specifically talking about it being exposed to accepting connections. So, you can have processes running in the DMZ that aren't accepting external connections, right? That's why any reverse proxy system where it's just a process-to-process reverse proxy rather than a machine-to-machine reverse proxy will do. So, often with the DMZ, you'll have your DMZ trusts the stuff behind the full-fledged firewall, and with the firewall, say your server is running behind the firewall, then you have a DMZ where the reverse proxy is running. The DMZ subnet will have to be trusted to some extent by the stuff behind the firewall in order to allow the reverse proxy, right? So that doesn't change. So in the case of Kestrel, the way it typically works, just like Node.exe or an application built with Go, which also Go until I believe 1.8, which was the release that was being worked on in December. So I think it only has just come out. Only added the requisite timeouts in order to do similar things. So we're not the only sort of high performance, direct embedded application server type model that has these sort of same caveats. You would have Kestrel only bound to local host ports. And that means that the reverse proxy running on the same machine in a separate process can obviously make connections to it, and the reverse proxy itself is open to outbound ports, to public ports, but Kestrel is not. So you can't connect to it unless you go through the thing that's actually connected to it via a local port. Also, Kestrel does support other port types. So on Linux, we support, I think it's called Unix sockets, which is kind of like name pipes on Windows, so that you can configure things like Nginx to not use TCP to talk between the two, but instead to use this other transport. It's not particularly a security thing. It's just a different sort of port type, I guess. But yeah, so like I said, we're continuing to do that stuff, and there's some stuff coming along which will be interesting to certain types of customers. What else is going on? Lots of stuff. I continue to port the Razor Pages stuff. I tweeted the other day, like the more I've been using Razor Pages, I've been porting file new sort of MVC application over to Razor Pages in preparation for building a template. So an application. The current plan is what we'll do, given Razor Pages as part of MVC, is we'll have two templates. So we'll have our existing web application template, which is the full template with Bootstrap and the UI and login and all that sort of stuff. We'll have two versions of that in VS and in the command line. There'll be one that is literally says, model-view-controller, and there'll be one that says Razor Pages. So you can choose how you want to do your HTML, because I know people are opinionated about that. I did entertain the idea of just getting rid of the MVC one completely and just doing a Razor Pages one for HTML, but I didn't want to invite the wrath of everyone. So we'll have both. But in doing so, I've been using it a lot, and the more I use it, the more I love it. And using it like this and rewriting so much of the sort of traditional large controller or lots of controllers with lots of view models and lots of views sort of stuff into a more page-focused approach with a page file, with a code behind file, which is your strongly typed model, which can be tested and all that type of stuff, and then your shared services. It seems to be a lot less complicated. The files are a lot more single responsibility because we don't have that massive account controller that's 500 lines. We're building lots of helper methods into Razor Pages to sort of encode the idioms that I'm seeing, the idioms that I'm inventing, the ones that I'm opinionated about. I'm like, okay, if you're doing page-focused programming using this framework that we've built, this is how I want you to use it. So we're going to add a method that lets you do this, a method that lets you do this. We're going to let you model binder properties, etc., etc. So it's looking really nice. And if people are interested, they can go up to my GitHub repo, Damian Edwards /Razor Pages sample, and the Razor Pages web application project in that solution. There's two projects in that solution. Is that template? It's almost finished. I've ported all the stuff except for the SMS two-factor auth, which is part of the template as well. I've done the email stuff. I'm using SendGrid for that. And I'm just doing the SMS stuff now. So it's interesting to see how it scales when you add a lot more code. And then we've got a couple of sort of last big features that we have to land to really clean up a lot of that code. So we need to get URL generation set up so that we've got nice convenience methods for generating URLs, so you don't have to hard code paths to the pages throughout everywhere, just like you would do with controllers today. You use routes and things to do that. So we're doing that right now. And we're also doing a nice feature so that you don't have to fully qualify all your page models. When you say app model, this is the class I want to use. Because of the nature of pages, you tend to have folders. Yeah, like you want to be able to manipulate the namespaces. So we're adding support for app namespace in Razor, and then have a convention that comes off that, so that the generated class that comes out of your Razor file sort of follows the C# pattern of having a namespace that's built up of the folders that it's in. And that way you can just reference the models that are next to the page without having to fully qualify them because they're in the same namespace. So we're doing all these little things now.
Well, you mentioned the URL generation. Is that similar to routing, or what's the?
It is routing. So that's the thing. You have to remember.
It's the same intrinsic.
Razor Pages is built on top of the same view engine and the same primitives as MVC. It is literally part of MVC. You don't have to bring it in. If you have MVC, you have Razor Pages, and it uses all the same subsystems. Like when you execute a Razor page, it's going through an action method behind the scenes that you don't see. It's an action selector that figured out that was there. It was a route. It's in the attribute route table. Like it's the same subsystem. Now we're just kind of building the convenience layer of methods and API on top of it, so that you don't have to use the lower level systems in order to do everything. So yeah, it's really, really nice. I really like it. I'm hoping Scott likes it because I know he's big on having a page-focused programming model for certain types of sites as well. But I don't think he's used it yet. So I'm looking forward to.
I've looked at the sample and I've thought about rewriting DOSBlog. I was talking with Mark Downey, who works on DOSBlog with me, about rewriting DOSBlog as Razor Pages. But
wow.
We keep right now we're talking about storage, whether or not it's SQLite or whether we keep using XML or we switch to JSON or what.
It'd be pluggable though, right? Wouldn't it? Your storage? No, you just don't want to go that far.
The problem is that the benefits of not assuming that the pluggable storage is a database are many. Like right now, DOSBlog knows that the XML files, which is 1 per day, right? So I've been blogging for 10 years, so I have 3,600 XML files, but DOSBlog knows it's not a database. It doesn't try to search it. It doesn't claim to be able to search it.
Yeah.
If I abstracted that away and allowed someone to use files on disk and or DocumentDB and or SQLite, I would hate to have leaking of concepts like searchability or not. So I want to make that a separate interface.
You would have to make it a separate interface. Like
right. Then you'd have the searchable thing. So right now it's convenient because it's like, oh, I know the day that blog post was, so I just can generate the file and I can get right to it. So you get free. You get the file system gives you free indexing.
It's kind of unfortunate that you can't search though.
I use Google.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you don't have. I've never realized you actually don't have a search on your webpage. I'm looking at it right now.
I do.
Where? I don't see it.
Look at the top. It's a big search box at the top of the screen.
Hanselman.com does not. Maybe the blog does.
Go to the blog. Hanselman.com is just a static web page.
Okay, then you do Google. You just
right.
You just
and
do Google.
And that's what static websites use for their search.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Let the internet do the searching. So anyway, the point is, Mark and I are talking about that, and we then we're wondering, well, how would you do templating? Because one of DOSBlog's kind of like features that was advanced in 2002 was the ability to have templating. We basically had Razor before Razor, where we had a custom templating thing.
Like a DSL?
As a DSL in DOSBlog, you make a .blog template file, and we had what you call tag helpers, where we called them macros.
Yep.
And we would basically, it was pretty cheesy. You could call a function. We would go and do it with reflection. So we'd use regular expressions, go through the template, find all the places you wanted to call a function, and then inject into that stuff. So it was basically Razor on top of web forms. That's why it's kind of slow. There's only so many ways to make angle brackets, right?
Yes.
So then the question is, do we do templating, or do we just do it as Razor pages, and then you just change the Razor page? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, would you separate the idea of like, oh, I want to go and buy a template from Template Forest and make it a separate file and have a whole blogging template engine? Or would you just say, we encourage you to mess with the pages and then have as little code as possible on the page?
Yep.
Like you just have the for loop.
Yeah, or you just have some APIs, like some helpers that say, put posts here, please.
Right, exactly.
And then like have a user edit a template, an item template type thing in MVC or something else to do all that.
The stuff we're struggling with is fighting with web forms to do things like change the meta tags and put in Twitter card support and all that kind of stuff is challenging.
Yes.
But I'm thinking that Razor pages might be the answer. We'll see.
Well, that's interesting. I'm like I said, I'm interested to see what you think when you actually try it. This YouTube chat just gets annoying. People are like, are there any good links for sites? There are, but I can't paste them in here. So
no link. You can paste it to me, and then I can paste it to them. I'm the king, apparently.
We
need to move this over to the .NET Foundation, John.
Yeah, I'll try and do that.
Just create a branded. I mean, there's a YouTube like branded channel you can create now. Just like
I looked into it.
Go into it. I nearly did the other day. Just under the Creator Studio, you say create new channel, branded channel. Then you can add the users who have access to it. And
branded channel.
Branded channel.
All right, we'll look into that. Cool. I told you I tried that open screen.
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to Hansel Minutia on the way in.
It was challenging.
And of course, as often happens when I listen to you in my car driving in, you call me while I'm listening to you, which is always surreal. But this time it was Google Hangouts trying to call me because you were starting this call, so I didn't answer. But yeah, it's always funny.
Nice.
What else was going on? NBC, there's a lot of other stuff, obviously, reacting to .NET Core 2, some of the new features that we'll talk about some more as they come up. I think I might have mentioned we're working on a new feature that allows us to basically include all of the ASP.NET Core assemblies as part of the .NET Core installer, basically. I'm glossing over a lot of details. But the end result is that when you publish an ASP.NET Core app by default in ASP.NET Core 2, one, you'll only have a single NuGet reference, which will be to Microsoft.ASP.NET-Core.all, which is a new meta package that we're having, and it'll be version 2.0. So you'll only have one version to track in order to maintain that you're on the latest version of ASP.NET Core, which is kind of nice. And then when you publish it, it doesn't include anything that's in that meta package because that's already in the store. Don't call it a GAC. Runtime assembly store of stuff. So that when you publish it to Azure or anyone who's installed ASP.NET Core 2 on the hosting server, your apps become tiny. So, for example, file new MVC application today with ASP.NET Core ends up after you publishing it being about 15 megabytes. And a lot of that is the static files, but a lot of it is actually all of our assemblies, right? And the refs that are required, the ref assemblies that are required to compile your Razor views at runtime on the server. If you pre-compile your Razor views, that goes down by a few meg because we can remove all the CSHTML files, we can remove all the refs, which is nice. In ASP.NET Core 2, that number is down to sort of 4 megabytes because now all you end up with is your application assembly, which is like 200 kilobytes, and all the static files. So, Bootstrap, jQuery validation, and some other stuff, the images that are used in the template, they make up the majority of the published output, which is kind of what you want in your web application. You want the compiled code, the C# code, and the compiled views to be the smallest part of everything, and it is now. So that's a really nice improvement that we're making as part of 2.0, and we're working through all the ramifications and experience of that right now, which is kind of cool. What else is going on? Perf stuff continues. I haven't got anything new really to talk about there. We're doing. So I have talked briefly about our desire to make leveraging Azure services better when using ASP.NET Core. So if you deploy an ASP.NET Core app to Azure App Service, we released an integration package in November last year as part of the 1.1 release. And there's like an Azure.app services integration package. And if you include that in your application and you call the light up method as part of your web host builder phase in program main, it sets up some stuff that makes your app work better with Azure App Services. It includes, for example, setting up the IIS header forwarding and stuff for you. It includes integrating with the Azure App Services portal logging, so that you can get thing like what is it called, Scott? The stream logging, log streaming. Yeah, so that works if you use that package. You can go into the portal and you can tick like the application diagnostics panel. You can say, or the blade, you can say, yes, I want application diagnostics. Yes, store it on file or store it into blob storage. All that stuff works if you use that package. So we're looking to continue that and make it a little more automatic, so that rather than you having to consciously add a package just because you're deploying to Azure, wouldn't it be nice if when you deploy to Azure, that experience of lighting up is part of Azure, not part of your app? And so we're doing some work such that once you've deployed to Azure, you can install a site extension, and we're looking at how to make the site extension experience, installation experience, sort of automatic or at least prompty, so that you don't have to go and find it in the gallery and all that type of stuff. But once you install, we'll call it the .NET Core site extension, it'll manage a bunch of parts of this app for you, and we can own that extension. We can version it on NuGet, like all types of stuff. You can have custom versions of it, and it can do lots of interesting things with your app, like the aforementioned setting up logs and things. It can show you very interesting diagnostic information about your app. It can tell you the version of .NET Core you're running on. It can tell you the versions of all the assemblies that were loaded. It can tell you if Server GC is enabled. It can you do lots of really interesting stuff as a sidecar application, which is nice. And then we're looking to apply the same principle to application insights, so that by default, if you deploy your application to Azure App Service, and then in the portal, you go and hit the Application Insights blade in App Service, and you say, yes, I would like Application Insights with this app, it installs a site extension that configures the app automatically for Application Insights without any code. And then you can control how much stuff goes to App Insights, for example, from the ASP.NET Core logging system, by way of a simple configuration file that lives outside of your app, that you would be able to edit either through something like the Kudu portal or eventually through a custom UI that would be part of that site extension. So now, it's just part of the fact that you're running in Azure. You get all this great stuff rather than you having to sort of make your app super sticky to Azure, if that makes sense. Obviously, you'd still be able to bring in App Insights manually and call their APIs to do custom telemetry tracking. All that stuff still works. But we're trying to make more of this stuff kind of work by default, out of the box, without you having to go and learn, these are the 3 packages I need, these are the 3 places I have to call APIs. You just want to kind of, after I publish, I click next, and now I get this great experience in Azure. So that's a big thing that we're working on that we're kind of excited about as well. What else? That's probably it. That's probably the good updates that I can share for today. Do we have some questions we want to ask or answer, I should say, before we head off?
There's always questions.
Always good questions.
One real quick thing as you're scamming them, I'd like to share my screen. There's one that Shane pointed out to me that I missed sharing before, which is this big post by Syed from this weekend on create your own templates.
Oh, that was a good one.
Yeah, so this is create your own templates for .NET New. And so he goes through, very in detail. So first he looks at, create a basic template, and then he goes into some other things like replaceable parameters and how to make it so that it changes things based on the parameters you set, and then also adding in optional content. So really
awesome.
good, really good thorough information there. So definitely a good one to include.
Cool.
All right.
Let's have a look. My chat window has some very odd scrolling behavior. It seems to keep jumping right back up to halfway during the.
Are you using Edge?
No. No.
The chat
hard
interface is a bit crazy.
John, you seem to be good at pulling these questions out.
Well, people aren't using the hashtag anymore. They did for a bit.
I'm just going to go backwards. Francesco asks, you've mentioned the support in 2.0 for aggregated packages. Are they standard NuGet packages, or are you extending tooling? Can we create our own aggregated packages from private repos? I'm not sure what he means. I've talked about the meta package, which is an existing NuGet concept that we're going to use by default. And I've talked about this new sort of runtime store for putting assemblies in, so that you don't have to deploy them in the application, even if they came from NuGet packages. And the answer is yes, you will be able to do all that yourself. So if that's what you're referring to, then yes, you will be able to do it. But if it's not what you're referring to, I'm sorry, maybe you can clarify what you meant by the aggregated packages. Francesco also asks, I can't use precompiled views in Service Fabric, x64 not supported. Will it be available in 2.0? I'm not aware of that limitation. x64, precompiled views should work fine with x64. They work fine with x86 because I use them in Azure App Service, which is all x86 right now. We are looking to support x64 in Azure App Service for ASP.NET Core as part of 2.0 as well. So if anyone has been holding out or a little disappointed that you couldn't run x64, 64-bit ASP.NET Core apps in Azure App Service, that will change in 2.0. So that will be good. You will be able to choose. Sorry, I don't know what I'm not quite sure what the limitation is regarding precompiled views, Service Fabric, and x64. So
Matthew Dennis asked if there was going to be an update on benchmarks README with current results anytime soon. I know
so that was talked about. So we're looking
at.
it was talked about internally.
Okay.
Someone sent a PR, it might have been Ben actually, to change the README from referencing the spreadsheet, which really isn't used anymore, to using the Power BI dashboard, which is what we use to track it all internally. So we were going to do a little bit of cleanup of the dashboard, and then we were going to update that README so that people can just track what we're doing on the dashboard. Obviously, normal caveats apply when looking at our own performance results. I encourage people not to do comparisons on that. Go look at things like Tech and Power to do comparisons. But if you just want to see our status and look at how we compare to ourselves, checking to check-in, then that's obviously what the Power BI dashboard is really about. So if that hasn't happened already, it should happen in the next week or so. Anything else? Damian, can we get a deep dive of how your team perf tests the ASP.NET Core development? So we did a couple of years ago, we did some of the first community stand-ups we did were in the Smurf lab, right? And showed some of the things we did. A lot of stuff has changed since then. Like I was doing it all manually back then. Now we have a Mike on the team who basically manages all that, and a lot of it's been automated. It's not rocket science. Like it's really just we have a bunch of servers under the table right here. They're actually at my feet. Plus we have a bunch of stuff in Azure. So we run a combination of Azure stuff and local stuff on physical hardware, for various reasons. And we have a little agent that we wrote, just a very simple agent that sits on them that allows us to submit jobs remotely, so that you can say, hey, please go and run a perf test on Kestrel using this branch or this commit, and then dump the results, and that then goes into a database. I think it goes into a SQL Azure database, and then the Power BI dashboard is just pointed at the database. Like we just hobbled together basically 3 or 4 disparate systems. It's really not that complicated.
How are you collecting perf stats on it?
Work. So we use work.
Right.
Okay. Work. So that all that really does is lets us gather RPS. And so you can output that to a file, and then I think we scan that and put that in a database. We still have to do the work to capture the other 3 things that we really should be measuring. So startup time, memory usage, and latency/jitter. So they're kind of their 4 points of our perf diamond that we want to measure. And then typically do things like spider graphs and things. Everyone knows what a spider graph is, right? So you have a star or a bunch of axes on a line, can be like 3 or 4 or 5, 6, however many you want, and then you calculate the variance or the difference between them by drawing. Oh, okay. Well, when we did this configuration, we got this number for this line, that number for that facet, that number for that facet, and you get like a little spider web. And if you overlay those, it looks like a spider web. And that's a good way of tracking how any given set of changes impacts all the various facets that you care about. So right now, we're still really only being focused. We focus primarily on RPS, but we have also looked a lot at startup time, but we still need to automate a bunch of our stuff in terms of tracking startup time, memory usage, and latency and jitter. So that work is ongoing. What's the perflow? Oh, yeah, work is just the driver. It's the Linux tool that we use to like send requests to the server, and then it dumps out all of its stats at the end. He had not discussed timeline or being on question. Roadmap update on 2.0. Are we still on track? I'm not on track because I was supposed to update that roadmap a few times. I just haven't done it yet. Sure. I'll just say yes, we're on track because I haven't told you what the track is. So it's easy for me just to say yes, we're on track. Yeah, work's going on. Basically, we're following the same as the .NET Core roadmap. I think they have a slightly more detailed roadmap. But I think the dates that are listed are still only quarters. And so, yeah, we're on track to ship 2.0 in Q3, I think is what it says. So, and there'd be a preview in Q2, which is now. Now is Q2. We just started Q2. So between now and the end of June, there would be a preview or two, and then we would look to RTM it in Q3 based on the current roadmap. And nothing that's happened so far suggests that we're not going to hit that. So. Any other questions, guys? I'm scrolling back now. I've only been looking at the last 2 pages. So if people want to bump their question to the top of the list, just post it again.
I keep trying to scroll and it jumps back down.
I know, because it jumps back down when people, it's not the best. Someone asked again about .NET Native Core IT. No, there's no update on any roadmap for .NET Native Core IT. As I've said a few times, like realistically, if I were a betting man, I mean, it's years. Like it's not months. It's not a year. It's probably multiple years. Maybe this time next year, we'll have some more concrete, firm plans. It is continuing to be worked on, but it is not a primary sort of concern on the backlog right now. So it doesn't have a trajectory and a plan and when we would ship and milestones and all that sort of stuff. Unlike .NET Native as part of UWP, which is obviously shipped and supported and gets updated with every Windows release and all the rest of it. Core IT .NET Native, which is what ASP.NET Core would ultimately end up supporting, is still a ways off. Has anyone done any benchmarking on the default service locator in ASP.NET Core versus other IOC options? That's from Ben Meadows. I haven't. I don't know of anyone. I haven't seen any blog posts about that. Have you seen any links about that?
Yeah, actually, there was one recently. I think it was like last week where somebody went through and did some.
Oh, really?
Different DI. So I'll try and paste that in the chat.
I'd be interested to see the result of that, actually.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, the container we have in the box isn't particularly full-featured, by design. It's only meant to be extremely basic and enough to support our stuff and the basics of apps. And then we encourage customers to use third-party IOC containers for the more specific sort of features that they can offer that we can't do in a base abstraction. But I'm really not aware of perf comparisons. I'd hope that we're competitive given how simple we are. But it'd be interesting to see. Does Node get run as an edge server, or does it also recommend a proxy? I've read a few articles about sort of productionifying Node, and they almost always, if not everyone I've read, talks about putting them behind Nginx, just like Go articles tend to do. Cloudflare published an article not long ago about putting Go on the public internet, and they basically went through all of these settings that are now there in Go 1.8, the various timeout settings that you have to set to do that. Interestingly, when that article was written, I don't know if it's changed since then, the Go settings weren't on by default. So by default, Go has no timeouts. So it's certainly not safe to put on the public internet without configuring them all. And that's what the Cloudflare article was talking about, was all the things that you should do before you make it public. Node has timeouts by default. I'm not aware of the full extent of what they are, if it has enough for people to be confident about putting it as an edge server. But most of the articles, like I said, if not all of them I've read, say you should stick it behind a reverse proxy. Anyone bumped one of their questions? DI speed, I did use in the sample in for, oh wow, that's a DI container I've never heard of before. How do you, is it Monk? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, it looks like MUNQ, Monk.
Monk, okay, never heard of it. Wow, cool. Is there a plan to port WPF to .NET Core, or maybe creating some other cross-platform UI framework? This is the wrong stand-up to ask that question.
Yeah.
I got nothing to announce about that at this time. I'm not aware of any plan to port WPF to .NET Core, though. WPF, the W stands for Windows, so, you know, take that as you will. Do you know, so Eric Smith asks, do you guys know if it's possible to use the new CS Proj with a web API project? I know it's not currently supported, but I've heard other people making it work. It is possible. Nick Craver has successfully made almost every variation of ASP.NET old project work with new CS Proj. The NuGet team did a blog post on how in VS 2017 you can default package references added to CS Projects to use the new package ref instead of packages.config or project.json. So yeah, it's possible. You can sort of, you can go file new ASP.NET core project empty, delete the existing references, and change the target framework to net 4.6, whatever, and then you can just start adding self-host ASP.NET web API stuff. Now, if you want to run it on IS, then you're going to have a little bit more trouble. If you're doing self-host, it'll be fairly straightforward. But if you're doing like system web-based stuff, then yeah, I'm not really sure how well it's going to work out. I mean, Nick did it, so maybe it works. You'll lose some tooling support, so scaffolding won't work. There might be some other aspects of the debug and launch experience that are tied to IIS that don't work because that code just doesn't exist in the new project system. It's all different. But just for compiling code and doing basic launching and debugging, I think it would work fine. Damian, can we get right-click publish of Azure functions with private internal assemblies from Michael Barton? Absolutely no idea. I'm guessing that's a tooling question. There's something to do with the ability to right mouse click publish from the ASP.NET Core project system directly to Azure Functions. I've never done it. Honestly, I don't really know much about that. I think our tooling team looks after that. That's a question for Syed, really. We should get that question to Syed. Or log it in the tooling repo. Anything else here? When I reference core projects, I get references in IntelliSense for its reference packages. That didn't happen in the old CS Prof. I always ask, yes. So Paul points out that in .NET Core, when he references other .NET Core projects, we call those P2P or project-to-project references, he gets their references and their referenced packages and IntelliSense. Those are called transitive references. So if A references B and B references C, if A will get C's packages and C's IntelliSense in the new .NET Core system, because we do transitive P2Ps. Okay? That's the term we use. That did not happen in the old CS Proj. It does happen in the new CS Proj, because it means that project-to-project references behave much more closely like package-to-package or project-to-package references. Transitives with packages does work, obviously. So if A is a project that references a package B and package B references a package C, then A gets C's references, right? Because that's how packages work. We wanted to simulate that. We don't want there to be a massive difference between projects and packages, because packages is how you share code in .NET across solutions. And so that's why that change is being made. What else? Can TFS on-premise build ASP.NET Core projects? When do we get first-class support? I don't know. I can't see why it wouldn't. I mean, you would just need the appropriate targets installed on the build server. So like usual, that would require generally installing the right version of Visual Studio on your build server in order to get the correct targets, or manually finding the right targets and putting them in the right location on your build server, which plenty of people do, and then ensuring you have the right version of MS Build on the build server. So VS 2017, and thus the targets it contains relies on MS Build 15, I think it is. So you would need to have that on your build server, and then it would just work. If the question was, is there a first-class template or something for it, then I'm not aware. I honestly don't know. I don't think so. I believe VSTS now has support for the stuff from VS 2017, but on-prem, I'm not sure. Matthew posted a link, or not a link, to the repo with the DISP comparisons. So Matthew DD Dennis /performance on GitHub. Yes, now. Is it possible with new CS Pros to reference a net standard 1.x project from a net 4xx targeted one? Yes. So only if the net 4x you're using is compatible with the net standard 1x that you're using. So remember, until net standard 2 and net 461, net 4x only supported very low versions of net standard. So I think if you use net standard 1.3, you need to use net standard 4.6, I think, as a minimum, in order to get that to be compatible. And then with net standard 2, the minimum for net standard 2.
1.6 or 4.6? You said 1.
I said net framework 4.6.
Net framework 4.6.
So yeah, so if you use net standard 1.3, you can load that in net framework 4.6, I think. I don't have the table memorized, but I seem to remember.
I need to fix that table. The top part of the table needs to have a background color. It would be much more clear.
Oh yeah, well that would be good. I mean, it all gets easier in net standard 2. Basically, with net standard 2, the minimum .NET Framework version is .NET Framework 4.6.1, which is the second latest version. I think the latest version is 4.6.2. It's the one in RS2, or the creators update, as you called it. So yeah, so that should work as long as they're compatible with the new project system. As long as both are using the new project system, it should work. .NET test. Question: does there exist documentation for XML project file definition, also for the project JSON definition? So there was documentation for the project JSON definition that is very likely has been removed now. And the question now is, does it exist documentation for the XML project file definition? So basically they're asking, is there a doc that goes over all the MS Build element types, item types, property names, etc. for the new MS Build based CS Proj .NET Core stuff? I don't know. It's MS Build. I mean, frankly, it's always been a little hard to find every single property because of the nature of how MS Build works. Like any target can define any property name and any target name. There are core targets, obviously the C# core targets and the common targets, things like build and publish and those sort of stuff. Honestly, I don't know if they're documented somewhere on the doc site. That's a good question. And specifically with the .NET Core stuff, all the new stuff that we added, there were some new features in MS Build added explicitly to support things. I am guessing that many of them are documented as part of other docs for .NET Core. I'm not sure if there's a similar, here's the project file format and here's every possible thing that you can set and what it does. That was a lot easier in Project JSON because it was a static definition in a lot of ways. MS Build very much isn't. It's really a programming language, so you can kind of do whatever you want. But for the predefined stuff, I agree that would be kind of helpful if it doesn't already exist. I'm not sure. We should find out. Question. We should also start winding up. Let's do the last one.
We're 10 minutes into other meetings that need to start.
It very quickly, doesn't it? Last question.
Sorry.
Is it possible to use JSON.NET 10 with current ASP.NET Core, or will the versions conflict? You should be able to upgrade fine. So you should just be able to take a direct reference to JSON.NET as a package, set the version to 10.0.1 or 10.0.2, whatever it is now, and that should be it. And it should just work, in theory.
Yeah, the new release.
And then Mad Holmes makes a suggestion. Scott should take the questions from live chat and tell it to Damian, instead of Damian having to both scan for questions and answer them. Yes, Scott, don't be so lazy and make me do all the work.
All right. So, thank you. Next week, then, what I'll try to do is, I don't know, copy paste them in a notepad and read them to Damian.
Well, I think in previous episodes, you would read the question out.
Sure.
Like you were interviewing me, and then I would answer them.
I'm happy to do
that worked pretty well, I think.
It's painful to watch you read.
It was less dead air, I think, that way. So, yes.
Okay. We will try to fix that. And then we will try to have somebody from EF on next week.
And I believe this is our 100th episode.
This is our 100th show?
Isn't that crazy?
No.
Wow, we need to be paid.
That's what I was told.
More.
Yeah.
We need to what?
We need to be paid more for this completely volunteer thing that we do every day.
For each show.
Yeah, we should be doubled the free that we get paid for this show.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. Can you dramatically zoom out?
I can dramatically zoom out. Engaged.
Dramatic zoom out. It's so dramatic.
So